So it is recording now. So this will be available later if you want to share this resource, or if for our registrants who weren't able to make it today, this will be available. I'll send out an email after this, and along with any of the resources that Jenny or Aaron share today. But thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to introduce our speaker. Her name is Dr. Jenny Keshwani. She is an associate professor of biological systems engineering and science literacy specialist. How cool is that? At the University of Nebraska. She leads the Growable team, and they strive to equip students with systems thinking and decision-making skills that critically assess and implement creative solutions to meet everyday challenges. Erin is also here today, and she is part of that awesome team. I've had the privilege to kind of work with him, or at least have some really great discussions with him about systems thinking over the last few years. And I really appreciate their skills and their expertise they bring to this really important topic. So with that, if you have any questions during this presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. Jenny mentioned she'll get to them as we move forward. And Jenny, you can go for it. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Amber. Super excited to be here today. This is a really fun group to get to chat with. So thanks for the invitation. Thanks for spending some time with us. So like Amber mentioned, I'm part of the Growable team, and Growable, we have a website. We always love to have folks visit our website. So growable.unl.edu. I'll have that link several times, I think, throughout the presentation today, just because it's something we've worked really hard on. Erin especially has put a lot of love and labor into our website, and it really just encapsulates everything that we do with Growable and the resources and tools that we've developed or found useful, and like to be able to share with folks that might also find them useful. So like Amber mentioned in my introduction, we are all about systems thinking and STEM-informed decision-making. Today, we are really going to focus in on systems thinking aspects of our work. And so systems thinking is a term that gets thrown around a lot right now. And I don't know if that's something that you've seen around in different areas of education or just media, different topics, but a lot of times people don't actually know what systems thinking actually means. And so to give us a little bit of common footing, systems thinking is really generally an approach to problem solving and understanding the world, right? So it's this idea that we recognize that the world is really complex and made up of a bunch of systems, and that those individual elements within a system are interconnected and they work together to bring about some function or purpose. So Amber mentioned we've been hanging out a lot lately, occasionally lately. I wish it was more, Amber, but we've been reading a lot of books, just to really get a good feeling for what systems thinking is. Highly recommend this one. This is kind of a book we keep going back to all the time. Donella Meadows is just an amazing describer of systems thinking, and this book, Thinking in Systems, is just a really great resource to, if you're interested and want to dive deeper into kind of broadly speaking, what is systems thinking? Awesome. I see Amber is super busy in the chat sharing all our links. So that's amazing, Amber. You might just need to follow me around and share links all the time. That's great.
Oh, no problem. I'm good at it.
Awesome. Thank you. So another way to think about systems thinking, and this comes from the Water Center, is to think about the habits that someone who's working on becoming a systems thinker is developing and growing. And the good news is this is something that we can all work on and develop. So kind of the growth mindset idea. So some of these habits, and this is actually right to the side of me in my office, and I take a picture of this because I want everybody to know that this is something I look at pretty much every day. So zoom in a little bit more, but it's really just a really useful tool to wrap my brain around what are some of these systems thinking concepts and how did I see them play out in my everyday life, right? So it's one thing to think, okay, all the elements in these systems that we're interacting with in the world, they're related and maybe they're working towards some function or purpose, and that's great. But what do I do with that information? And so these really help me kind of dive into that and think about the habits when we're designing curriculum or games or other activities for students, or even when I'm just considering the things happening in my own life. Because Aaron and I have had tons of conversations over the past couple of years about, well, this is really showing this aspect of systems thinking. We're like system sightings in the news, like, oh, this story is talking about how these system impacts are really playing into a story or a decision that was made. So looking more closely at these habits, some of my favorites, right? So kind of just this general basic idea that there's meaningful connections within and between systems, right? And so the image that they're sharing here is that someone's life, right? We're not just like living in silos in every capacity, right? We go to school, we're one person, we go to work, we have our faith or other activities we're involved with in the community, we go to our home, we work with do things with our family. Those are all interconnected, and there's meaningful things that happen within and between those systems. So what happens in my home life is definitely impacting what happens in my school life and my work life. So kind of a general understanding of systems, and they're connected. So another one I like to think about is this idea that we change perspectives to increase understanding. And so you can see this image where somebody is talking with a younger child, and they have no idea what's going on until they get down on their level. And then they can see exactly what this younger, shorter person is describing, right? Because their perspective of the system is different. So this is the idea that we each have a different position within this broader system. And because of those different perspectives, sometimes we see things differently. And it's not good or a bad thing. It's just more information. And sometimes by putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes, we can think about new areas of a system, come up with different solutions, understand things differently or in a more meaningful way. And potentially one of the most powerful habits of a systems thinker, and this is really kind of our goal in a lot of these things, right? It's like, well, this is great to understand, but what do we actually do with this information? How do we put it into action, right? We all want to be action-oriented and making changes in the worlds that we live in, the world that we live in. So this is the idea of using the understanding of a system, whether that's something as simple as just understanding there's connections between different parts of the system or changing your perspective, using that understanding to identify possible leverage actions. So a leverage action usually happens at deeper core aspects of a system. It's thinking kind of, if you're thinking like in a health capacity, instead of treating the symptoms, you're treating the root cause. So if you can dig deep within the system, really understand how those systems are functioning together, you have a better chance of identifying something that's deeper within the system to make a change there that's going to have these impacts that are ramified throughout the system. So an example of this is the idea of quick fixes that fail, right? And that's something, another one of our favorite books. Can you tell we read books a lot in our group? We love having book discussions. And I have a whole big pile next to me that I had to like shove out of the way before I hopped on the call because I didn't want to be too distracting.
What was that book called, Jenny?
Oh, sorry. Systems Thinking for Social Change.
Oh, good. Yep. Thanks.
Yep. It's by David Peter Stroh. And he talks about the idea of finding leverage actions and how if you're not thinking in a systems capacity, finding those leverage actions often can result in a quick fix that fails. So an example, plus cute dog pictures, like kind of a double bonus there. So this is our dog, Jubilee. Jubilee is a rescue, and she's about half pit bull and half little dogs. And because of that, she's small and mighty. She's like pure muscle. Like she's super, super strong. But she's little. She's like 38 pounds. But when I take Billy for a walk, we call her Billy for short, she loves to pull because she's just all muscle and she wants to go as fast as she possibly can. So when we think about a quick fix that fails in this capacity, if I just walk faster to like meet Billy's need to go as fast as she can, that fixes the issue short term. But long term, she's just learning that if she pulls, she's going to get exactly what she wants, right? So if anybody's dog trainer or interested in dog training, you know, like the psychology of working with animals in this capacity is that you can't just let them get whatever they want, right? You need to be training them and getting at that root cause, that deeper systemic way to look at the system and addressing their actual need for discipline in that sense. So kind of a general idea of how looking at these deeper systemic issues allows us to find the leverage points.
Jenny, that I can't help but think, my goodness, that reminds me of parenting strategies as well. There's a lot of short term versus long term. And sometimes
Yes.
long term is thinking about that is harder in the moment, but it pays out.
For sure.
That's good.
Yes, I love that. Thanks, Amber. All right, so that's a super brief kind of overview of systems thinking and why it's important. So now we're going to jump to the other side of our topic for today, and then we'll bring both aspects together. So games are really powerful learning tools. And I don't know about y'all on the call, but when I look at these pictures of dominoes and video games and all these other things, like there's a lot of happy memories, right? This feels happy, this feels joyful, this is like fun. And everybody's got their cameras off, but anybody play games? Like, is this something that's like awesome? Amber and Aaron, you're awesome game players. Yes. It's just something that feels good. Allie, perfect. So playing games is a fun way. Oh, look, all the answers now. People are like chiming in. Games bring out this kind of community, communal aspect, right? We love to play games together. And really, it's just a way for our students or learners to have that kind of joy in an educational setting, if we can tie these aspects together with games and using them as a learning tool. So what does this look like? And I will warn you, the more you learn about game-based learning, the harder it is to play a game just for the pure sake of playing a game. Like, I analyze every single game I play now. Like, what am I learning? Where am I making decisions? So listen, but carefully. So where we start here, within a game, whatever game it is, there's some confines that say this is the objective of the game. This is what we're trying to achieve, either individually or as a team. Players are working within those confines and making some sort of decisions, right? So if there's no decisions being made by the players, it's not a game. It's just like a simulation, right? There's just something happening and you're watching it. But that interactive part where I'm choosing to go this direction instead of that direction. I'm choosing to make this move or that move, whatever that might be. So that provides a really open-ended way to explore whatever the topic of that game might be. So then we move into this failure and feedback aspect of gameplay. And this is where a lot of learning can happen, right? And so gameplay is designed to either win or lose, right? That's kind of the point of a game. And so your behaviors in the game, your actions, decisions that you make, either end up in a positive way or they have a negative outcome. And oftentimes that feedback comes pretty quickly, right? So it's not like in a traditional classroom where you turn in your assignment and maybe hopefully a week later you get your feedback. This happens pretty fast. So by the time the game is over, you have a pretty good idea if your strategy was good or bad. And then you get to play it again, or sometimes even within that individual game. You can adjust your actions, you can choose a different strategy, you can learn from the people that you're playing with, you can go on a website, you can watch Twitch and see what folks are doing to play the game better. There's really just a lot of ways to think about how to improve your actions and then jump right back into exploring the game. And so this opportunity to learn through gaming is really powerful. And we've been able to see this in action quite a bit through all of the different games that we get to develop. And so really starting with this idea of you're developing awareness. So In the game that we're going to talk about today, Prairie Protector, we're building awareness of why a prairie ecosystem is important and what might be negatively impacting that system. So you explore, you experience this unfamiliar issue. Could be conservation, could be a lot of different topics. And then we offer opportunities for low stakes decision making, right? In the real world, if I go out and make a decision for how to manage my property or something of that nature, it costs me something if I make the wrong decision. In a game, you can test it out, try it. If it doesn't work, come back again tomorrow and play it again, and nothing negative is happening. You also get a chance to build some empathy for folks that work within the system. And so some of our players have expressed some of those ideas that helps us kind of put it into perspective. So you can see this is pretty early on. This was definitely before COVID. We have some students playing one of our games together, and they're exploring the system, and they're saying, okay, the problem in this game is whatever. My objective to win the game is something. And then they just get to be really curious and try things out, right? I wonder what will happen if I try this choice or moving this direction. And then over time, they realize that the people that really work in these systems, assuming that we're helping them make that connection, it's really hard because they have limited time or resources, or funding is an issue, or all these different things might be limiting the ability to make the choices that they want, right? I think sometimes it's easier to be like the armchair quarterback idea, right? Where you're sitting back saying, well, they should have made that play. That would have been way better. But when you're in it and you're actually making those decisions, you realize that, well, yes, that would be the better choice, but I have these constraints, whether it be time or money or whatever else, that doesn't allow me to make that decision. And so it really helps the players develop some empathy for others that are working within these systems. All right, so hopefully I've convinced everyone that systems thinking is an important thing to develop, and that games are a great tool to develop learning, especially in areas of systems thinking. So let's talk about what it takes to build a game and what that whole process looks like. So first off, it takes a lot of people. And so I think it's always something, it's intriguing to folks. And a lot of times when Erin and I share about how we use games to teach a different concept, lots of people are like, oh, this is great. I want to make a game to teach X. I'm like, that's awesome. We should definitely build a game to do that. But it's going to take a whole lot of time and a whole lot of folks devoting a lot of time to that game development. So this is a non-exhaustive list of folks that were involved with developing Prairie Protector. And I always get nervous when I share this slide because I know for sure somebody's missing, but I'm not sure who. So there's just a lot of people involved in developing games. And the other side of this is remembering that we can't develop games that are chocolate covered broccoli. Does anybody like chocolate covered broccoli? I mean, chocolate covered bacon was a big thing a few years ago, but nobody really, I didn't think that was that great. Chocolate covered broccoli is definitely not that appetizing. I guess I've never actually tried it. Have you tried it, Erin? No. All right. So chocolate covered broccoli is the idea. Yeah, Sean, definitely. It's gross. Chocolate covered broccoli is that our students, our learners are really smart, and they're going to know if we try to pull a fast one on them and give them a game that's actually broccoli, right? And so if you try to build a game and embed in the game a bunch of quizzes or things that feel like homework, they're going to know that it's not actually a game, that it's homework. And so thinking about how to avoid the chocolate covered broccoli in developing a game, an educational game, is really a big part of the design process. And so what this looks like, to avoid the chocolate covered broccoli is most times Aaron and I will sit down and really discuss what are the learning objectives for this game. What do we want students to learn? What do we hope they come away with, whether that's some awareness of a new topic, an understanding of how certain aspect of the system works, different decisions that can be made. So we outline those learning objectives, and then we look at what content is available to us, right? Oftentimes we work with actual research-based models because that way we know that we're sending the right message, right? Because the worst thing one bad thing that could happen is we teach students the wrong message, right? We teach because they're playing the game, they learn something that we don't want them to learn, or they learn the wrong way that a model works. So we really want to make sure that we're following the best scientific understanding of that system. So oftentimes that means we're working with models behind the game to make those decisions. So we look at what resources are available to us, right? What information is known, what interactions are known, how much of the system can we map out and really understand? And then where are the decision points within that system? So how can we give the players some agency in interacting with the system, give them some capacity to make decisions and change things within the game itself, and then use that to develop some sort of storyline that the game is going to be following. And so developing the win scenario is often the hardest part of this game development, because what does it mean to win at rangeland management? Like, what does that look like? And so trying to figure out what are the actual metrics that we want to measure that are meaningful, that are interesting enough for the students, and that are portraying the right message, right? That are actually sharing what actually functions within an optimal landscape that would be good and also meet these game learning objectives. All right, I'm going to take a little pause because I've been talking an awful lot. Does anybody have questions before I jump into Prairie Project?
Jenny, I think, a question, or I do have a question.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how to ask it. A lot of times in the world of environmental education or outdoor learning, there's a lot of gameplay involved, in curriculums like Project Wild and Project Wet and things like that. Yep. And then, so we have that, and then we also have this understanding of like that unstructured, like kind of, I don't know how I'm asking this, like also the importance of unstructured, almost like free play. And so I guess what is your approach in finding that balance between that kind of unstructured and structured through games? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I will attempt to answer, and if I'm not completely understanding, you can course correct.
Yeah.
So I think the difference is free play is, like you said, great and a very valuable opportunity for our learners. We really try to target areas with our games that just really don't allow free play. And so like when we're talking about making decisions as a land manager, like you can't as a 12-year-old go free play and have a plot of land and make those decisions and decide to burn that tree or not. Like, and so we really try to work in spaces where that makes sense. If it's an area where they can actually do things and have the speed of feedback that allows actual quality learning, I think that's definitely preferred to be more of a free play setting. I don't know, does that kind of answer what you were thinking?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's just something I think about because yeah, depending on the games, it's like a spectrum of like how much like that free play learning within the rules, using the imagination and things like that. But it's interesting you mentioned that quick corrective feedback too is important. So
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. All right, so the Prairie Project. The Prairie Project is a large USDA-funded project working with 3 states, Texas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, that Drac Twidwell, who some of you may know in agronomy Hort here at UNL, got us involved with, us being me and Aaron. And we had a really steep learning curve to understand kind of what was going on with the Prairie Project. So this was really intended to look at multi-species grazing and pyrrhic herbivory, which are big words that I learned being involved with the Prairie Project. Basically, the idea, kind of what's shown in the graphic here, of using both cattle and goats as well as fire to manage rangelands across the greater Plains states. So I feel kind of like I'm telling people things that they already know, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, part of really the main focus of the Prairie Project is to deal with invasive species across grasslands. So you may have heard the threat of the green glacier. So in Nebraska, this is primarily eastern red cedar, which is encroaching throughout the sandhills and other grasslands and replacing lands that were traditionally grasses and wildflowers with all of these trees. And this is, of course, a problem because we need our grasslands and prairies to be healthy and support all the biodiversity and amazing things that happen on our grassland prairies. So you can see here, this is the same site where trees have invaded the native prairie land and then were later removed. So there are management strategies that can be used to help reduce the impact of these invasive species, trees in grasslands, such as mechanical removal or prescribed burning and different fire management. Again, maybe you all are super aware of this, but historically, our grasslands were maintained primarily through a lot of burning, and fire has been largely removed from the ecosystem due to a variety of cultural factors. But due to that, it's allowed species like eastern red cedar to really spread across the landscape. And why do we care? So thinking about the system as a whole, these grasslands are a leverage point, right? They're a core background of our ecosystem, and they contribute to all these other different factors, such as the biodiversity in insects and grassland birds and other mammals that live in our ecosystems. It impacts water quality, nutrient cycling, carbon sequestration, like all these different factors are impacted by the presence of healthy grassland ecosystems. So Aaron and I, like I mentioned, had a big crash course on prescribed burning and on prairie ecosystems, because that wasn't a background area for either of us. We actually attended a training for how to conduct a prescribed burn, which was really interesting. We haven't put that information into action yet, Aaron. Maybe we should do that someday and just host a little burn out on the prairie. And so we were doing a lot of digging around different sources to try to understand what is this problem, what is the challenge, and what are we trying to accomplish with this education aspect of the Prairie Project. And so we stumbled upon this blog post by Chris Heltzer with the Nature Conservancy, and he really compared the spread of these invasive trees to Missile Command, which is an old school Atari game. I don't know if anybody's having like some happy flashbacks to arcades in the 80s and playing those games. If you need some help, this is Missile Command. Basically, the idea is that there's these missiles and they're raining down on your cities, and you fire at them and stop them from destroying your cities. So it's a pretty basic concept. There's really no way to win Missile Command. You just stay alive as long as you possibly can. And so Chris Heltzer was comparing trying to remove eastern red cedar from the landscape is like this. They just keep coming and coming and faster, and you just keep trying to take them out one at a time and trying to make some progress and hold on to the prairie as long as we possibly can. And so, of course, that's maybe not the most positive message to send our youth, but it really got our wheels spinning. And so we're like, okay, if it's just kind of the idea for how we can develop a game around invasive species in a grassland. And so we ran with this and had our amazing team of folks to collaborate with. And we developed Prairie Protector. So y'all can play Prairie Protector. Just go to prairieprotector.com and you can play it as much as you'd like. It's a pretty short game. I wouldn't recommend playing on your smartphone. It is possible, but it's just kind of clunky and annoying. So check out the website. It's fun. And you can see we decided to really go with inspiration from Missile Command and keep it kind of an 80s arcadey feel. So it's really pixelated and it has kind of the general game feel from an older style game. So definitely no like super fancy graphics and 3D imaging kind of stuff. All right, so in Prairie Protector, you play as a land manager. And so you're given a plot of land, and you can see here there's a smattering of trees across your landscape, and your goal is to remove them all from your landscape. And so each year you get 16 coins in this level, and then you have different treatment options you can apply to your land. So you have small fires, big fires, and then some mechanical tools. Eventually, on some of the levels, you actually have a bulldozer option, in addition to the chainsaw and the axe. Each of the management tools has a different efficiency. And so we really try to work with the researchers in this capacity to make those efficiencies make sense. So both the expense of doing each of the different treatments, as well as what impact they had on the system, both in removing trees and in preventing spread of the eastern red cedar after the trees were removed. And so those capacities were built into the game engine that runs this game. But when you're playing the game, you can either play as a single player or you can play with neighbors to really build in this aspect of what decisions you make versus what decisions your neighbors make. Really makes an impact on how well you're able to remove the eastern red cedar from your piece of land. All of the neighbors are played by the computer, mostly for computational simplicity. It turned out to be really tricky to allow multiple players to play on the same game at the same time. But this allowed us to give different personalities to each of those computer players. So we have one that's super pyrophobic, so they're afraid to no matter what. And different choices that the players make are based on these different personalities of the landowners. So you play the game year by year. So you place all of your treatments and you click to the next year. And then you see what the impacts of those decisions were. So really quick feedback. And then you keep making those decisions until you clear your land. At the end of the game, you can see your results. And so here we won, so that's exciting. How many coins you spent, so how expensive it was for you to manage your piece of land, how much prairie, how much dispersal of the eastern red cedar. More interestingly, which types of tools were you choosing to use? So you can see here, we as the player mostly use small fires with a little bit of other management strategies, but then some of the other players like Mercedes hardly used anything. So lots of chainsaws and bulldozers, but really didn't have too many expenses. You can see here, Tara used a lot of chainsaw. So Tara was really focused on using the chainsaw. So this type of feedback at the end allows this player to assess what decisions they made and think about what worked, maybe what their neighbors did that worked better, and really make some decisions moving forward so that when you open up Prairie Protector the next time, you can use that information to guide your gameplay strategy. So along with this, and I already showed you the systems graph for about the ways that the prairies are a leverage point within the system. We use a tool called Loopy, and again, another link to throw in the chat. So Loopy is freely available and created by Nikki Case. We've modified it and made it a little bit different for our uses. And so feel free to use Loopy in your way. Anything that you're talking about with youth is just a really cool systems modeling tool. And so in Loopy, you're able to draw systems, and we have students play the game and then think about what systems did they see functioning during the game. So it can be as simple as this balancing feedback loop where the more vegetation there is, the more cattle show up, but then more cattle eat more of the vegetation. So the vegetation goes down and then there's fewer cattle. So it's kind of this balancing feedback loop of how those two factors, elements play within the game. Or it can be something really complex, right? On the right side, we can see how Eastern Red Cedar, they're connecting this to a lot of different factors, how much grassland is available, what's the impact of money, how does that impact cattle production, water use, everything all the way over to distillers grain production. Like it really gets pretty broad. And students gain some of this information from actually playing the game, but they're also supported by their teachers. And so because the game allows the students to gain some awareness of rangeland management and invasive Eastern Red Cedar and all these different topics that maybe they had no idea about, now they have a little bit of interest and they're like, okay, let's talk about how cattle production plays into all these other factors and why we might be looking at different points within the system to create some leverage. So when we're designing these games, I mentioned a little bit of the process that we go through to think about what the winning scenario is, what decisions players are making throughout the game. But we always have to remember who we're developing it for, right? And so in this case, we developed Prairie Protector for middle school, high school youth. So thinking about what they find interesting, what's going to be intriguing to them, but also just as importantly, their teachers. Is it something that their teachers want to bring into their classroom? Is there places for that to fit within their curriculum? Is it easy enough to use that they might actually want to do that? And so bringing together all these different pieces is a big part of designing the game. So we've been able to test Prairie Protector with a couple different groups of students. So this first group it was an adventure. So we had a group of 7th graders, and this was like peak COVID. And so we had intended to go out to talk with them in their classroom, but like the day before, their teacher emailed us, was like, hey, we got a lot of COVID going through our school right now. We better do this on Zoom. So we talked to 7th graders on Zoom about their experience playing Prairie Protector, and it was all kinds of exciting. So they had, prior to our discussion, spent 4 class periods playing Prairie Protector, discussing it, working through some reflection questions, talking with their teacher about the kind of general idea of Prairie Protector. And then we chatted with them for about 30 minutes over Zoom and did a little bit of basic analysis of that discussion. So because this was pretty early on and really just served as a pilot to see kind of, are students getting anything from this experience? And so good news was, yes, they are learning some things. So we found that the middle school students were developing strategies that were evolving as they played the game. So they learned to take care of the younger trees before the older trees. So by doing the older trees transitioned a lot slower. And so they were able to get rid of all those young ones and then tackle the ones that had been there longer. And also to start on the perimeter and work towards the center. So kind of set up a boundary and then move in on the spread of trees. And it was really exciting to share this with Drac and his team, because that's exactly the strategy they want the land managers to understand and develop. He's like, can we have them play this game? Like, that would be great if they could get to this level of understanding. So super exciting that our middle school students were getting to that point by playing the game for a week. They were also developing some empathy for the folks that actually have to deal with this type of situation. So they're like, this is really stressful. I mean, they were just playing this game on their computers, but they're like, this is really hard. Like, I can tell, like, this is really stressful for folks that have to be trying to work against the spread of trees. And also definitely getting some perspective from their teacher, who was sharing with them a lot of the economic impacts, and how, like, man, if like all these farms or ranches go out of business, like, that could really hurt the economy. This could have these really big ripple effects throughout the system, even though it's just in this one aspect of our economy. So after that experience with the middle school students, we had an opportunity to talk with high school students. Similarly, they had about a week where they worked with Prairie Protector and some of the supporting materials that Erin's developed, all on growable.com, growable.edu. Sorry, Erin. So
unl.edu. Otherwise, we'll never get there.
Growable.unl.edu. Yes. But it's prairieprotector.com. So it's confusing. Yes. All right. So with the high school students, we had a 50-minute focus group with each class, and we did this in person, which was really a lot of fun, just to be around high school students and learn a little bit from their experience in playing the game. So again, we saw that the students gained awareness, right? And so they started mentioning things like they were driving in their community and they noticed there's a lot of trees around. Maybe that wasn't something they had seen before. They realized that controlled burning and fire in general was really useful, and not just that it helped clear the land, but that it had these longer term impacts and prevented trees from growing for a while. And I really enjoy high school students. They're just really a fun population. So again, this student was like, the game is really helpful to learn, and I didn't realize like this was a problem. So it's like really developing this awareness. But they're then talking about how they plant trees and they have wind blocks and stuff, but definitely not cedar trees. Like, that to them now it's becoming like this embarrassing, like, faux pas, like, oh, definitely no cedar in our land. Like, we wouldn't even think about doing that. And so really thinking about different trees differently was something we started to see. And yeah, so this is a picture, and I was not driving, I was a passenger, but now I see cedar every place I drive. And it wasn't until we started working on this, wasn't something that really stuck out to me that much. But here's our lovely cedar trees lining the interstate. So we also found that the high school students were building some empathy for the land managers. So you can see here, they're like, oh, it's probably really expensive to have to take care of these things and do it over and over again. It's really just kind of this consistency. It's like a discipline, right? To stay on top of the spread of trees on your land. And they're realizing that, like, with the game, like, I just click a button and it's next year. But for these land managers, they have to do each whole year and every year be thinking about how the trees are showing up on their property and what they need to be doing to manage that, and just really be consistent and persistent in that. One of the more interesting things that we saw with these students was a lot of confusion about trees not always being a good thing. And I think, especially being the home of Arbor Day and things like that, there's a lot of confusion on why we would be even considering getting rid of trees in the landscape. And so you see here's some comments from students. It's really confusing. So we want to grow more trees, but we also want to burn down the trees. Like, this is really just kind of causing them a lot of consternation, and really connecting that with climate change and carbon sequestration and all those kind of big topics, right? And so everybody's like, oh, we need more trees to like fix stuff. But then we should just kind of like cut them all down, like just no more air for us actually, and kind of like this fatalistic view of the high schooler, which again are so enjoying. But they're like, why do we want to get rid of the trees when obviously the trees are where we're removing carbon from the atmosphere and doing all these things. And some of the students really got to a little bit deeper level and realized that these invasive eastern red cedar is actually native to Nebraska. It's just because the way that we're changing land management and removing fire from the landscape and things like that is what's causing it to become a problem. And so they're really wrestling with this. It's native, but it's a problem, but it's kind of like, that's just really weird, and trying to figure out like how to put those two realities together. And then really from that, seeing students kind of get to that deeper level of understanding, where like, okay, we don't want to get rid of every single tree, but we need some. And so kind of allowing themselves to get into this grayer area, where a lot of times it's the right or wrong, black and white kind of idea, especially at the middle or at the high school level, where they're wanting to have the right answer or wrong answer, and then being able to make a decision based on that. And we really had a lot of fun maybe diving into this topic with the students, because there really was a lack of understanding that a grassland itself played any role at all in carbon sequestration. The message has mostly been received that trees are good for carbon sequestration, and any other plant is kind of like, meh, I don't know if that plays a role. And so really trying to figure out where that misconception was coming from with our students, and what we can maybe tweak in a Prairie Protector 2.0 or something like that, to really help students understand that the root system and everything that's involved with grasslands is really, really important, and something to be maintaining and really focusing on. All right, so tying the student quotes back to systems thinking. So here's our habits of a systems thinker again. Maybe you were catching some of these as we were talking through some of their quotes. So thinking about seeking to understand the big picture, right? The students were seeing that the trees can be good, they're invasive, but they're also native, like trying to understand like how do all these pieces fit together, and really talking through that. And so seeking to understand the big picture, but also considering an issue fully. So they're not saying, okay, I'm just going to jump in right away and say trees are all bad, I'm going to get rid of every single tree because that's what I learned from this game. But more so having some nuance there, thinking about, okay, if there's a tree, let me figure out if this tree is good or bad for this particular landscape, given the particular nature of that tree and the specifics of the landscape I'm looking at, and then dealing with what may or may not be an issue. Also thinking about changing perspective, right? So the students were starting to think about taking on the perspective of the land manager, right? They're realizing that, okay, in the game it's one thing, but in real life, it'd be expensive, it'd be annoying, it'd be repetitive, all these different terms to describe how they were feeling about taking care of the land in this ongoing many year process. They're also thinking about how the trees accumulate over time and that rate of change, right? So they're not just looking at one single year, but realizing every single year the trees are changing, their rate of change is changing depending on which tools they're using and all these different aspects. And so they're thinking about these different aspects in applying some of these different habits of systems thinking. All right, so what did we do with all this information? We did a lot of chewing on these comments and thinking about what the students were actually trying to communicate. And we were able to develop a model of the habits of a systems thinker that kind of shows different buckets, I guess we'll use that word, in different buckets of these different habits and how they interrelate. And the most important thing about this graphic is that it's a continuous looping system, right? It's not that you start by making meaningful connections with the system and then you go down the list and capture all of these habits and develop that way. You're developing them all simultaneously in kind of a mishmash behavior. And so it's not that we saw students definitely starting in one spot and then developing to a fully systems thinker type person, but you could start at any point, and maybe you're just really interested in thinking about the unintended consequences, and you hop into systems thinking down in the catalyzing action aspect, and then through that interest you start realizing some of these other aspects of conceptualizing the system and analyzing and thinking about how people play into those systems. So yeah, so definitely learned a lot developing Prairie Protector, and then getting to get some actual feedback from the students that played our game. So we're always working on different projects. So please check out growable.unl.edu and see all of the things that we're developing and what's going on in our worlds at the moment. We also have 2 new programs that are coming soon, and we're recruiting high school educators to work with us on both these programs. So Cultivate Access is a virtual mentoring program that's partnering with Growable and some other folks to develop some new activities for students. One of those is around data science and agriculture. Potentially developing a Prairie Protector 2.0 or some other type of interactive data science focused game and learning modules. If you'd like to be involved with that, we're recruiting educators to join us next summer. And there's a stipend, and you get some of our books that we're reading. So part of my big pile here, maybe I'll send you part of my pile. It'd be really fun. We also have another project also connected to both Cultivate Access and Growable, where we're looking at climate resilience and developing some tools and an educator community of practice to develop some training resources for educators in that capacity. So again, reach out. You can sign up at our go.unl.edu/cultivate link if you'd like to be kept up to date on either of these programs, or reach out to either me or Erin if you have ways you'd like to follow up. But thank you all for attending today and letting me chat about Prairie Protector and games. It's always fun to talk about games.
That's so great, Jenny. Very cool. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Jenny or Erin on systems thinking in a broad sense or in any of these particular games? I'm curious if you've ever integrated the Prairie Protector in any kind of like adult learning with actual landowners. Because I know that, you know, at Game and Parks, at least, we work with a lot of landowners to think about these things, and it seems like such a great tool, not just for students. I don't know if that's ever been done.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've talked with Direct Woodwell about doing that. I don't know that he's ever implemented it though, but I'm not sure that it's ever happened. But it would be super fun.
Yeah. Any questions for Jenny? These new ones look really, really good too. Climate resilience and data science and agriculture. I'd be really interested in seeing where those go.
Definitely. Yeah, we're super excited to get to move forward with those. Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny. I wrote down all the resources you shared today. So I will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone who participated, also with a link to this recording and your contact information for more. But this was really cool. What an awesome tool that Nebraska has. And I'm glad more people are learning about it. So thank you so much. Also, I really like the habit of systems thinking graphic. I'm going to probably print that and put it in my office. So thank you.
Do it. It is great.
Very cool. Yeah, it kind of got my mind going on some other stuff. So
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah.
Bye.